Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Orthodox Bench with Boyan. I'm the Boyan in question, and I hope to answer any questions you might have from my own personal knowledge and experience and opinions. Bear that in mind. Today's question is about the use of organ music in Orthodox services, and the question comes from Stranger Capital. He essentially asked what are my opinions on the use of organ in Orthodox worship, because his parish uses it for, choral parts of the service, and simultaneously he feels that it's perfectly fine, but also feels that it's a bit off because it's not part of traditional Orthodox worship. And I can completely echo these opinions and impressions because they are both simultaneously true, and I'll explain why. This video will be a bit of a crazy ride that will involve cars, icons, incense, and organ music. Let me start with cars. For me, music is like cars. I essentially have zero interest in it, and I don't know anything about it except the ultimate basics, and even if that. I love listening to music. I believe it is a tremendous gift of God for us, but I like driving cars. I'm learning to drive a car, but I have simply zero interest in it. Recently, my mother asked me, "Oh, by the way, what type of car do you drive during the classes?" I'm like, "Are you seriously asking me that?" Because I have literally zero clue. I simply told her it's white. Similar with music, I simply have no training in it. I can't sing to save my life. Some of you people wrongly assume that just because I'm a reader that I know how to sing. That's false. And this will be simply, don't expect anything technical about music in this video. So let me start off. Traditionally, Christianity in general did not use music in its worship in the sense of musical instruments. Part of it, a large part of it, was because it was associated with secular music, and especially in the East, it was considered, it was very much associated with pagan worship. And that is why no instruments were used, and this remained completely consistent in Orthodoxy until like the 20th century US. Similar things sort of happened with incense in the Western Church, where they did not use incense for a very long time because it was particularly associated with pagans, but especially with the cult of the Roman Emperor. And we all know from the lives of the saints how many martyrs were forced, or attempt was made to force them to offer incense to the statues of the emperor, which led to their untimely deaths. However, of course, the religious proper use of incense prevailed, so the Western Church uses it. However, us Orthodox have stayed relatively consistent with the use of the instruments. Now, there was an organ in Hagia Sophia, but again, this was used for secular purposes because it was used for imperial processions. Of course, I didn't know any of this before recording this video because I Googled it all beforehand. And I'll put the article I've used in the in the description. A lot of these videos are sometimes, some things I read and I simply present them in my own horrible way. And a lot of you guys like it, so there we have it. Let me turn to icons real quick. And the reason why these organs are used in a very small amount of Greek churches in the United States, it's sort of, we had a similar phase with iconography. Let me put it this way. Okay, so we have our icons and they look sort of very flat, no perspective, in what most people would assume is perspective. There is perspective, but it's reverse perspective and everything. Artists in the West have sort of rediscovered, depth, perspective, and so on. And it was like an entire new universe was revealed to them. So they start making these grand paintings and so on. And a lot of people in the Orthodox world, like iconographers, were like, wow, these are amazing, let's use that, because our icons are so very flat. And that is how we got all these academic icons, which are much more realistic. And by the way, whatever you might assume, this does not mean that they're less of an icon. They're perfectly fine, because the style never really factored in the, iconoclastic debates. So there was this new movement of these realistic icons, and a lot of iconography from like 17th, 18th, 19th centuries and like that. However, in using this sort of realistic imagery, we found something very important in our very flat style icons, that their sort of flatness shows some higher spiritual truths, that they're much more solemn, that they point out to something greater. And this is even echoed in the secular art, because a lot of modern art, and I know that a lot of you will be like, banana on a mattress. I'm not talking about that. But a lot of modern art, even like very practical art, like in design, is very flat because of the same reason. Because, in the sense of, it shows that more can be achieved with less, and it's much more proper to a flat surface in a way. But we have theological reasons why our icons are so flat, but this isn't, again, ultimate argument against more realistic icons. Similar to music, in the sense of, we did not use musical instruments in worship for like 20 centuries. However, I think it was Archbishop Yakovos who introduced the organ, because when the organ was introduced in Catholic worship in how many centuries ago, it was essentially considered the queen of instruments and practically the only proper one for Catholic worship. I can understand why the Archbishop, went this route, in the sense of like, oh wow, it really sounds cool, maybe we should use that in our services as well. So he introduces it. It did not really catch on, to be quite honest. I've been to a number of Greek churches in the US, and none of them had an organ. And it really remains a minority from what I could see. However, just because something is, and by the way, I like organ and I don't mind it in worship. However, a lot of what the organ achieves in traditional Catholic worship, we achieve with ison, which is that rumbling sound that provides the background for singing, a lot of my choir people like to call this the vacuum cleaner. So there you get it. So anyway, yeah. I think it will fizzle out, because, let us be honest, a lot of things that form our practice in our spirituality are simply based on vibes. Let's put it this way, because we did not use musical instruments because they were associated. The vibes were about paganism. In contemporary Orthodox worship, they will be associated in particular with Catholicism, and to a lesser extent to Protestantism, so it's a no-no. We don't even use eggs during fast because Armenians used it. It's literally in our canon law, and I'm like, thanks Armenians, yeah, I really needed that protein, and because of you now I can have it. So to bring your question home, there's nothing inherently wrong with an organ or music and so on. However, based on our previous experience of pagan worship, of Catholics and Protestants using it, and also I might add that introduction of practically all instruments into worship has tended to end up in worship disaster. I do not see them being used. And by the way, don't get me wrong, just because I see nothing inherently wrong with it, I'm not pro it. I think that we're perfectly fine as we are, and there is large there is a large. Actually, no, wait. We do use some instruments, like we use bells. Bell is an instrument. So there's something we use in very traditional Orthodox worship, especially like those jingly bells we use on censers. Yeah, they don't create a melody, but they do create a sound, and that's a typical instrument. So yeah, I generally I wouldn't like other instruments being used in Orthodox worship. I don't think there's inherently anything wrong with them. However, I think that the associations with them are poor enough that we should absolutely abstain from any sort of their use in Orthodox worship. No, I do not mean you should stop going to a parish that uses them. That would be simply idiotic. Like, because somebody's pressing keys that make sound, you're going to not attend the Eucharist where Christ is present. That would be idiotic. So yeah, there you have it. I hope I answered your question. Bye.